Welcome back to Goalie Training Pro TV. Today I'm going to teach you how not to tear your groin. Welcome back to part 3 of the 3-part series that I like to call You and Your Groin. In part 1 of the series, we covered what to do in the first sort of 24 to 48 hours up to a week after you've initially torn your groin. So if that is you, or you worry that one day it might be you, then go and check out this video. Part 2 was advanced rehab techniques. So once you're over the initial healing stage, what exercises do you need to do to sort of make sure that you're going to have a successful return to the ice? Because the last thing you want is to have time off because you've had an injury and then go out and get the exact same injury again because you didn't quite do the right things before you got back on the ice. So that's part 2, so you can get that there. Today is all about giving you the exercises to add to your off-ice training routine. So injury prevention or injury reduction is really just good training. There isn't a specific, oh, well, now I'm doing my training for performance, now I'm doing my training for injury prevention. Good training is good training. So these are the types of things to add to your existing off-ice training program. Let's assume that maybe it's a good program. Make sure if you're new here, you subscribe. If you subscribe, hit the bell, and that's how you get a notification whenever I post a new video. Let's go. If we haven't met yet, my name is Maria Mountain, and in addition to being a strength coach for the last 25 years, I spent 5 of those years working in a sport medicine clinic as the exercise specialist. I've rehabbed a lot of groins, and I'm not ashamed to say it. So let's look at the techniques that are going to help you stay off the DL with an LBI. It won't surprise any of you that the #1 technique to reduce your risk of groin strains is doing the right kind of mobility training. And that to me means strength in all positions. So that's using techniques like CARs, controlled articular rotations, pails and rails, to build strength and smarts all through the range of motion. So if you're not familiar with CARs or pails and rails, I've done videos on them before. They come from the FRC sort of method, which was created by a guy named Dr. Andrea Spina, super smart guy. You should give him a follow if you want to learn more about the science behind mobility training. But, you know, CARs, just to give you an example, would be like a hip, so this would be a quadruped hip circle. So what I'm trying to do is stabilize my torso and explore all the range of motion in that hip joint. So I'm not just sort of staying, oh, okay, I'm going to do some hip circles. I'm really trying to get as much range of motion as I can. And then I'm also generating tension. So I'm isometrically generating tension in that joint, almost like I'm trying to stir really thick, honey with my leg, so that I'm creating strength. So that does 2 things. #1, we don't have an awareness of what our hip joint can actually do, because when you think about how much we use it in daily life, it doesn't do that much. We walk up and down stairs, we sit on the toilet, we get in and out of the car, we sit at a desk, we sit on the sofa. That isn't really overly challenging in the range of motion department. We look at what we do with our arms, we reach to the top shelf, like, I know Paul hid chocolate chips somewhere up here. We do all kinds of things. We wash our hair and so our shoulders have a pretty good awareness of what they can do. But our hip joint, we never really teach it. Like, hey, you actually have all this extra range of motion. But then we get on the ice and start smashing into a butterfly or an RVH, and then we're shocked that we strain a groin or we pull a muscle. So controlled articular rotations feed input into our nervous system to help us learn or reacquaint ourselves with, wow, our hips actually can do a lot of stuff. We're also helping to generate tension in that outer range. That isometric tension does translate into building strength. So we can build strength in that outer range. I like that quadruped cars. I actually really like doing it against a wall because it helps keep me honest. You know, it's harder for me to wiggle my body around if I make sure that my shoulder and my hip are touching that wall. Then I can really explore all that range of motion. And you would do 2 to 3 in each direction, but you have to be generating tension. If you're doing it and it's like, oh, that's super easy, like this feels like nothing, then you're doing it wrong, 100%. You have to generate that tension. It should feel like work. It should feel like exercise. Now, having said that, if you're feeling a pinch or a pain in the front of your hip or in your groin as you go through any range of motion, then you need to stay out of that range of motion. And you probably should get it checked to see, hey, why am I getting pinching and pain in a joint when I'm just going through range of motion? Then if we move on to a technique like pails and rails, so progressive and regressive angular isometric loads, this is where we can really zero in on building strength at length. The thing about isometric strengthening, so strengthening when I'm just contracting my muscle without a change in overall muscle length, is that strength that I'm developing in that exercise is really just specific to that angle, plus or minus like 3 to 5 degrees. Well, this, you know, in real life, if I was, if I did this for like my bench press, let's say, it wouldn't be very helpful. Or I guess if I was working sticking point, but, you know, building overall strength through range of motion, that's not that helpful because I'd have to do an isometric at all these different ranges of motion to get strength through the full movement. For us, it's perfect because, you know, we do our functional training that already works a lot of this frontal plane stuff, but where we need some extra strength and control is in that very outer range. So pails and rails, it's like it was made for goalies. Let me just give you an example of 1 or 2 exercises that I think have tremendous value, especially when it comes to reducing the risk of groin strain. I think the half kneeling groin pails and rails is a great place to start. So we can get in our extended position, half groin position. If you watch, like I mentioned before, like I'm kind of weird, but I'll watch videos of goalies getting injured to study what position they're in and what the mechanism is. And very often, yes, a lot of times it is sort of they're trying to do a full splits, but very often it's a half groin position where either they're reaching towards or reaching away. But we're going to go to this half groin position to build strength at length. So you'll get in a good half groin stretch, and you're just going to hold that for 30 seconds. So it's a good stretch. If you had like a dowel or something, you could definitely hold on to that for balance, no problem at all. Then what you're going to do though, after that 30-second hold, you're going to push this foot straight down into the floor. So now I'm contracting my groins and I'm building that contraction, you know, really up to, and I'm building it over time to like a maximum contraction. So now I'm building maximum strength in this maximally lengthened position. It doesn't get more specific than this. Plus, since I'm controlling that, the tension, it's a safe way to do it, or as safe as you can get. So I'm going to build that tension for 30 seconds. Then I'm going to use the muscles on the outside of my hip to almost pull me down further. So it's almost as if I were trying to lift this leg off the floor kind of thing. Pull me down further for 30 seconds. And then I'm just going to relax and hold that position for 30 seconds. So of all the exercises are the movements of pails and rails that help you reduce your risk of groin strain, I think that's a great one to start with. So I'm interested to know if you stretch at least 4 times a week, if you kind of stretch randomly just when you think of it when you're watching TV or watching a hockey game and you decide you're going to stretch in front of the TV, or if you follow an actual goalie specific mobility program that's designed by someone who actually knows how to design a goalie-specific mobility program, or maybe you're in one of my programs. Drop a comment below. Let me know kind of where you're at on that spectrum. So either, yes, I stretch consistently. I don't really do this stuff, but I stretch consistently at least 4 times a week. Number 2 is, yeah, I stretch when I think of it. And number 3 is, yeah, like I've had a mobility program designed for me. I follow it religiously. And tell me too about how you feel on the ice, or what you felt like on the ice after you've done that proper mobility training for even a couple weeks. So the second thing you need to reduce your risk of groin injury is to have hip strength, kind of global strength. So we look at abductor to adductor ratio. I think sometimes in off-ice training programs, ones that I see goalies getting from their teams or their trainers, there's a lot of emphasis on lateral pushing muscles, which is great. Don't get me wrong, it's super important. We use those, anytime we're moving side to side in the crease. But what gets missed a lot is the adductor. And it depends whether you're in season or off season, when you want to really be overloading those adductors or your groin muscles. But I feel like it gets missed a lot, or it's sort of strengthened isometrically in one position, or it's strengthened in a non-functional way, like using that groin machine at the gym. I was talking to a goalie the other week who's like, I'm the only one who ever uses that. It's like, there's a reason for that. Drop a comment if you know exactly what I mean, and if you're the only one at your gym who uses that groin machine. The good news is you don't have to use it, because it doesn't actually help that much. But I'll give you a couple exercises that sort of help those global muscles, so the big movers, but I'm also going to show you one that kind of helps work the rotator cuff muscles of the hip. One of my favorite just global strengthening exercises for the hip is called the 4-way hip. And you can use a cable column or a low pulley, or you can use a resistance band. Yes, the type of resistance is a little bit different, but what's most important is that you use what you got and that you get it done. I like this exercise not just for the strengthening that's going to be done on the leg where I've attached the resistance, but also the stabilization that goes on with the other leg. So what you might feel, or what I hear from you when I work with you guys, is that, I really feel this leg working hard. It's this leg that gets exhausted more so than the leg that's kind of doing the work. I've attached that bungee down on my ankle just with an ankle strap. Then I'm going to come heel to toe. So my heel's going to come in front, straight out to the side, and then I'll go toe to heel. So my toe goes back to my heel. So I'm getting, because our adductors is not just one muscle. It's different muscles, and they work in different positions. When our body's in different positions, different muscles are active. So that's why I want to go heel to toe. I'm staying nice and level in my pelvis. And again, this leg is doing work. These adductors are doing work as well to stabilize. And then we really just go around the clock. So I'm going to turn a quarter of a turn here, and then I'm bringing this knee up as high as my belly button. And I want to make sure I get it as high as my belly button so that I'm getting my iliopsoas to do some work as well. If I'm just bringing it up as high as my hip, then that's really my rectus femoris, which is a quadricep muscle that crosses my hip and my knee. But it's getting the work. And I think sometimes it really gets overused because we don't get an activation, or we just don't use our iliopsoas, because like I talked about earlier, what we do in our day-to-day life, there isn't that much that's demanding for it in a hip flexor capacity. So this way I want to make sure that we're getting that movement. Then we're going to spin around, and we're going to do I'm keeping the band behind me, and I'm going to do a little abduction, making sure my toe points straight ahead or slightly in, keeping my pelvis level. So it isn't a huge range of motion. And then I turn another quarter turn, and I'll come into extension, keeping that knee straight, coming from just in front of my body to just behind, and I can reach around, and I should feel my glutes working when I do that action. Notice again, everything else is staying still. I'm not leaning forward, or I'm not trying to get huge range of motion. I'm just working my hip in its natural range. Another movement pattern we work on is called pelvis on femur rotation. So my femur is stable, my knee's pointing straight ahead, and I'm rotating my pelvis on my femur. Again, the goalies that I work with just have no clue how to use their hips. So they kind of have these default patterns, but when we try to ask them to deliberately do specific movements with their hips, it's like, what, huh? What? Like, I don't know how to do that. Whereas when I've worked with baseball pitchers, you know, and you say, well, let's do some shoulder external rotation. You know, they have a good sense of what that is. They're not all over the place. You know, we have to work stability, but they kind of know how to do that. When I get a goalie the first time to do pelvis on femur rotation, it's hard. Like, they're turning their shoulders, but their pelvis is staying still. So the way to kind of dial in on, okay, is this pelvis on femur rotation, is to put your fingertips on your ASIS, your hip bones, and then to rotate, and those hip bones should be rotating. So if I had like two flashlights coming out of my hip bones, the light would be over there, and then the light would be over there. So that would be the place to start, just getting that rotation in the first place. But then, just like a baseball pitcher, we want to strengthen and maybe probably more importantly, give some stamina or some muscular endurance to those muscles that help control that movement, that control the rotation of the femur in the pelvis. So we can add a little bit of resistance, that not a lot. Again, these are stabilization muscles. So when we work with pitchers, we're not going to have them doing external rotations with like a 30-pound dumbbell. It's going to be a lighter dumbbell, but we're going to do, you know, a fair number of repetitions. So in this one, we're going to do nice and slow, because again, we want control. We're going to do about 3 repetitions each way to start. And I'm trying to just keep my hands in line with my belly button. And it's hard because you can see there are weak points in the range and points where it's really hard for me to keep my balance. And this is only with 5 pounds of resistance. So go super light with this and work on getting the pattern nice and smooth. And when you do that, you need to do each leg in each direction. So I will go this way with this leg, and then I'm going to go this way with my other leg, trying to be pretty smooth with it, trying not to use my hands, so keeping my elbows tucked in. Then I would have to turn and face the other direction and go again. And the third piece of the puzzle is functional strength and dynamic control. So this is where we're going to go into some eccentric actions, eccentric to concentric, some impulse drops, that kind of thing. So if we start off, so we usually start with bilateral and then move to unilateral. So 2 legs and then we go to 1 leg. And I'm on my synthetic ice, but it doesn't need to be synthetic ice. It can be linoleum flooring, hardwood flooring, a little square puck board, anything that you have, a glider on the turf, whatever you have at your disposal. It's just something that's going to slide. I'm kneeling on hockey socks just for a little more slide and some cushioning. But I'm going to start with just eccentric control. And again, this should be a part of your normal training program. But eccentric control, so I'm slowly coming down. I'll put my hands down and come back up with my legs. So the tension in the muscle is on the lengthening portion, not on the concentric portion. So I'm completely unloaded coming back up. So, you know, I would do like 6 repetitions with 5 or 6 seconds down, getting that strength as the muscle's lengthening. Then we would go bilateral, eccentric to concentric. And notice how I'm staying up in my hips. Like, I'm not coming way down and crouching down to get there. I'm staying tall in my hips the way I would want to be on the ice, lengthening out, squeezing back up together. Then the next, and you wouldn't go through these phases like I'm doing it 1, 2, 3 in the same workout. You'd work on just eccentric strengthening for one of your training phases. Then you'd go to eccentric and concentric for the next training phase. And then you go into some impulse drops. So again, bilateral impulse drops. So just boom, dropping down, stabilizing, coming back up. Drop, stabilize, come back up. This isn't an exercise or a workout that we're doing to just, let's test your groin. Like you tore your groin, let's test it and see how this feels. No, this isn't what that's for. This is for when we're training, we have no injury. Also, I'm not really going to my full extent when I'm doing that. I'm working more just, not in the extreme end range, working on, okay, how does my body respond to an impulse? Because again, when we do slow movements, that's great. But when you watch injuries occur to goalies on the ice, it's not typically a slow movement. Typically, it's that an impulse reach and the body just doesn't know how to accommodate it. So from there, we would go the same progression, but with us like a half groin position. So I'm going to lengthen out as far as I can, put my hands down, come back up. Lengthen out as far as I can, hands down, come back up. Then I would go to a concentric eccentric pattern. And then again, I would go to an impulse drop and pull back up. And I'm not doing it like a plyometric, so I'm not trying to like drop and pull back up right away. I'm really trying to get that lengthening control and come back up. Once I've got those mastered, they're feeling good, then I'll add in some more awkward body positions and rotations and put my torso in different positions, because the muscles of our hips integrate with the muscles of our abdomen, of our core. And so, maybe I'm fine here, but if I add in a reach, well, that overloads the system. So, I'll do exactly that. And I'll go through the same progression we talked about. Might be bilateral to start with, reaching in different positions, reaching behind me, and all those different postures you can think of. Then I'm going to go half groin, the same, half groin reaching in the direction I'm going. Half groin reaching away from the direction that I'm going. Even putting my leg in different positions, getting out behind me a little bit as I add those rotations. What we're trying to do is build a vocabulary of movement so that when we get in those positions in a game situation, our body has some clue about, oh yeah, actually I've been here before and I sort of know what to do. Another drill that I think is really valuable for goalies to work on is just single knee balance. So getting comfortable, balancing, stabilizing, I'll add chaos to it, add different positions and try to fight for your balance. And again, anything we can do to help those muscles be smarter and more reactive in different positions. Those are the key elements. So we need to improve neural drive so that your brain understands or is reminded of all the amazing things that your hip actually can do. We need to increase the control and strength of those small muscles in the outer range, but also the big muscles. We need to build dynamic control or impulse control so that when things are happening very quickly, our body knows how to respond quickly and appropriately. And I've given you some samples of exercises. I haven't given you a specific, oh, well, you have to do this and then do that, because it really depends on the training age of the goalie, the age of the goalie, your injury history, all of those things feed into it. So there isn't an answer, but what I want you to do is, from this video, is get some ideas like, oh yeah, like, okay, I do that. Like my program has that in there. Or, geez, I go to the gym and I squat and I deadlift and like everything's on two legs and I don't really do any of this supplemental stuff. I better look at adding that in, or how can I incorporate that, or talk to my trainer about how to incorporate that. Even doing this stuff doesn't guarantee you won't ever strain your groin. Injuries happen, it's a part of sport, but it dramatically helps reduce your risk. And on the plus side, it actually really improves your performance too, because these movements that are helping reduce your risk of injury are also the movements that help you make that save and then get compact again, ready to make the second or third or fourth save as needed. I will mention too that I do have a group online training program. So if you want me to design all of your workouts, help you set up your schedule to suit your busy life, that's an option. I'll drop a a link in the description below, and you can fill out an application, see if you qualify. I'll actually make the link say, see if you qualify to work with me, or maybe see if I qualify to work with you, as the case may be. Either way, if it looks like the right fit, we'll get on a Zoom call and we'll chat about it and make sure that this is the place for you. I'm going to reinforce the idea that good training looks after all this. So you shouldn't have your training program and then your prehab program. It should all be incorporated into one. And if you missed the last video on advanced rehab technique, or you missed the video before that on what to do in the first sort of 24 to 48 hours, up to 1 week after you've strained your groin, make sure you go and check those videos out next. I will catch you on the flip side.